welcome back to the class, everyone. Most of the mechanics within Galaxy of Heroes are fairly self-explanatory. Offense up on a character is going to increase their offense. Potency up on a character is going to increase their potency. But there are some mechanics out there that do a really poor job of explaining themselves. And that is exactly what I want to be covering in today's video. 5 mechanics that you probably don't know about. Now, I will say, if you watch a lot of my content, you'll probably come across 2 that you actually do know how they work, but there are some in here that I've never covered before. So the first one that we need to talk about, which is new by the way, is going to be Jar Jar, or more precisely, his basic ability. The way that this first part reads is that you will have an equal chance to apply one of these 3 effects, being Death Mark on the healthiest enemy, if they have at least 3 debuffs, damage immunity on your weakest Gungan ally, or Tenacity up for 1 turn to all allies. And that's not how this ability works, even though it might read that way, or if it reads that way to me. So if I go into the Galactic Challenge, I can actually show you what this is supposed to do, or rather explain what it's supposed to do as it does what it's supposed to do. So going in, we're going to get a very specific setup here to best showcase this. We'll use that ability, get Death Mark on Bombardier. Perfect. So now, what the basic ability really wants to do at its core, it wants to apply Death Mark. That is the first priority in here. So it will do a check. It will look for the healthiest enemy and see if they have 3 debuffs on them. If it meets that check, there's an 80% chance that it will land Death Mark on them. It will not consider the other 2 if that 80% chance lands. So I will go ahead and use my basic ability. I will, of course, not get Death Mark right now because nobody meets that requirement. The second priority for the basic ability is that it wants to apply damage immunity to the weakest Gungan ally. The tricky thing in here that is not mentioned at all is that your weakest Gungan ally has to be below 50% protection. And even then, it's an 80% chance to apply, just like the Death Mark was. So if that fails as well, it can't find an ally that meets that criteria, or if it fails, then everyone will get Tenacity up. So I can say, beyond the shadow of a doubt right now, the basic ability will apply Tenacity up because there's no healthiest enemy out there that will meet the criteria for Death Mark, and Bombardier is probably my weakest Gungan ally right now, does not have below 50% protection, so therefore it cannot get damage immunity. And you will see this happen over and over again. My Gungans, once again, get Tenacity up, Tenacity up, Tenacity up, because those 2 criteria are not being met. We occasionally will get 3 debuffs here on Zombie, but Zombie's not, especially with the amount of damage we're doing to her, she is not going to be the healthiest enemy, so we won't be applying Death Mark to her. And what will eventually happen here in a second is once Bombardier drops below 50% protection and Jar Jar uses his basic, there's an 80% chance right there, damage immunity, just procced on him. And it'll happen again and again and again. Occasionally, it'll fail, and then we'll get our Tenacity up, and that'll be fine. But that's really how this ability works. It's not 100% at random. At its heart, it wants to be applying Death Mark. If it can't apply Death Mark, it looks for someone who's under 50% protection, weakest Gungan ally, to apply damage immunity to, like it just did like 5 times. And if it fails both those checks, it will ultimately go to Tenacity down. So that is the first mechanic that I really wanted to cover, having to do with Jar Jar and that ability that is just really poorly explained. Next up is going to be Tenacity down. Now, I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, so you might have just heard this, so I'll be really quick on it. But all the characters that I have listed here, Crew, who has Tenacity down as basic, Malik, who has Tenacity down as basic, HK, who has it on AoE, as well as IG-11 having it on AoE. Every single instance of Tenacity down a game, not just on those 4 characters that I mentioned, is 100% irresistible. It doesn't matter how much tenacity your opponent team has, Tenacity down will land if, and this is a big if, and someone actually commented this on my previous video, it can be evaded. So this is one of the actual reasons that dodge crons were a massive problem, because you couldn't apply Tenacity down, or even say evasion down, to characters with a extreme amount of dodge, because they could actually dodge the debuff entirely. So that is one thing to note. And then once Tenacity down is applied, it is an effective negative 99,000 tenacity. It's not 50%, it's an obscenely large number. The reason why that matters is because even with that in effect, there is a small chance that an opponent, or your character with Tenacity down, can still resist effects because for whatever reason, CG built in a 15% chance to always resist, regardless of the amount of potency or tenacity that does exist. So that's the second mechanic. Tenacity down basically can't be resisted. Next up is Armor Shred is not a debuff. And this is a little bit confusing, even though the game does actually spell it out for us, and we will see that here in a second. But Gas's Armor Shred, Kiadimundi's Armor Shred, Fennec's Armor Shred, Sabine's Armor Shred, Moff Gideon's, it's pretty much all the same. These do not actually register as debuffs. And you might think, okay, I don't really care if it registers as a debuff, but there are some instances where having a debuff on an enemy and dealing damage to them can proc another mechanic. So what I want to go in and show you again in the abilities here is one of the things that can get in the way, and this is not meant to be an exclusive list because we're only going to look at one thing here in total, is that you want to sometimes attack characters that do have a debuff, and it can be really confusing why Armor Shred is not counting as such. In fact, there's a datacron going around right now for smugglers where they have 100% evasion if they are not debuffed. So coming right into this battle, the reason why this matters is to be able to get Boba Fett Scion of Django's contract. He has to, or rather his team has to, deal damage while buffed to a character that is debuffed. So we're just kind of buying some time here in the very beginning. I'm going to go ahead and apply Armor Shred to Asajj Ventress. And we look at Asajj Ventress, and it will actually flat out tell us. The game isn't lying about this. Can't be dispelled or resisted, whatever. Not a debuff. Like, they put it in there for us. And the reason why this matters, again, at least for this exact instance, is because Boba Fett Scion of Django needs to deal damage to characters with debuffs. Now, Greef Karga has a buff on him right now, being stealth. If I go ahead and hit Asajj, you'll see that my contract, well, you won't see it. My contract is currently at 0%. If I go in here, use the basic on Asajj, still at 0%. Not actually a debuff, so it didn't count. Now, if I do go and hit her now that she has daze when Mando has critical chance up, suddenly 5%. So this can actually be a pretty big deal as far as the overall Armor Shred goes, because if you're looking for a nice secondary effect out there, then you're not really going to be able to get it. So that is ultimately the third mechanic, is that Armor Shred is not a debuff. Now, next up is going to be very specific to Commander Ahsoka Tano. We all know that her Force Leap is a fantastic ability. The first time, and only the first time it is used, it will instantly defeat the target enemy, and after that, it will start applying Armor Shred. Up until there, everyone pretty much knows how all that works. One of the things that we don't entirely get is that Shien will actually continually increase the damage of Force Leap until the next time it's used. The reason why this is relevant, and I bring it up, is because there are some enemies out there that just can't be paper cut to death after hitting them with essentially smaller damage Force Leaps. So one of the things you can do is you can forego actually using the Force Leap every single time it comes up, because Shien will have it so that every single time that someone who has it attacks at a turn, she's going to increase her damage for that ability by 50%. The reason why we want to forego using it is that 50% stacking stops until the next time it's used. So if we can build up, we can eventually have the most damage in game. I actually believe Scribe was able to do something like 1 billion damage or something like that to an enemy in the Heroic Sith raid with Commander Ahsoka Tano. So definitely really high potential for good damage, and again, can be helpful for bringing down some of the bigger characters that can't just be brought down with hits after hit after hit after hit. Now, the last mechanic that I want to cover actually has to do with thermal detonators, and the fact that they are not created equal. I don't know why CG did this. I think they've actually looked at changing it, and they couldn't, so here we are. And basically what this boils down to is Dengar, his thermal detonators, they do 20% of max health damage. Super cool. Boush's do 30. Same debuff, looks the same, has a lot of the same criteria about like the characters you need to deal damage to that are thermal detonators for, I think, Jabba's contract. That still counts, but it's different. Jawa Engineer, 28.5. Why they need to add the 0.5? I have no idea, but they did. And this is pretty consistent across all bounty hunters or all thermal detonator characters. You will occasionally find a character that has one that's the same. Like I think Mob of course is 40%. I think Zam is the same as Boush or Jawa Engineer. I don't know. It is really annoying though. The reason why I bring this up is because there was a battle that I was in a long time ago. It was actually against Jabba. and I was using Darth Vader because he was a relevant counter with a Datacron at the time, and I only had 4 thermal detonators on me, and I was at 100% health, so I was thinking, oh, they each do about 20% damage, because that's what they've done before, like with Dengar, so I'll just take this turn into Merciless Massacre and be completely fine. No, it was Bush's thermal detonators, which is actually 120% of my max health, which killed me, and then I lost, and it was awful. So, that is something that we need to take into mind, that thermal detonators are not created equally. They do different damage or different max health damage depending on the character they're on. As a bonus for thermal detonators, if they do crit, they deal critical damage based off of the victim's critical damage, crit damage set, not the applier. Because how the game is coded, when a thermal detonator goes off, the one inflicting the damage is yourself because it's on you. I'm not going to explain further because if I already explained it slightly wrong, I'll continue explaining it wrong. But at any rate, those are the 5 mechanics I wanted to cover. Jar Jar's mess of a basic. Tenacity down is irresistible. Armor Shred is in a debuff. Shien actually can make a Commander Ahsoka really powerful in her one big hit. And thermals are not created equally. So thank you guys for watching. Until the next time, stay awesome.